All right, welcome back, students. What we're going to talk about today is energy. So there's a couple of rules we talk about in energy. First of all, we'll define what energy is. Energy can be defined as the ability to do work, sort of the classic definition of what energy is. Another way you can look at it is it's the capacity to bring about movement against an opposing force. So most of the time students have an idea of what energy is, but often we have a hard time describing it. Energy comes in several different forms or ways you can look at it. One thing you can do is look at energy as being either potential, which is stored up energy, or kinetic, which is energy in motion. So the food, for example, that you eat is potential energy. It's stored up energy often in the molecules you eat. If you eat say a candy bar, there's stored up energy in that. And then if you're running, you're actually burning some of the calories that would be in that food. You're using that energy for motion, and that would be an example then of kinetic energy. And we have a couple of laws that we use when we talk about entropy, mainly coming from physics and chemistry, and so we call these the laws of thermodynamics, and there's two of them. The first law is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you can take energy from one source and change it into another source of energy. So for example, the electricity in your house. You usually think about electricity being a very clean, burning kind of energy, but in fact, you got to think about where the energy originally came from. So often, especially in the past, in the United States, we would burn coal, and we would burn a lot of coal, and that coal had stored up energy in it and was converted or transferred or transformed into electrical energy, and the coal burning released a lot of toxic chemicals into the air, and still does, especially in different parts of the world, but it's transferred into electricity. So you can't ever make new energy, you can only transfer it or transform it. And then the second law is often confusing for people, and it's basically the idea that we say in the second law of thermodynamics is that energy is something that isn't able to be transferred with 100% efficiency, which means that every time you transfer energy, some of the energy escapes as a source, for example, is heat. Okay, so for example, if you take a hamburger and there's 1,000 calories in the hamburger, when you eat the hamburger, you don't actually get 1,000 calories out of the hamburger that you can use, because as you chew it up and try to digest it, some of the energy in that escapes as heat. So this idea of entropy is that entropy is a measure of how disordered something is, and so heat is, in the energy sense at least, is the ultimate source of high entropy, meaning it is very disorganized. So heat itself is a state that the energy is not organized in a way that you can actually use it. So heat is actually like a byproduct of burning food or wood or that kind of thing. And here just shows you sort of a steam engine example where maybe you're burning coal or wood, it boils the water, the heat energy of that escapes, but some of the movement of those molecules of water as they turn into steam can be used to drive a piston or turn a wheel and things like that. Okay? The other thing we could do that's important in this class is talk about kinds of chemical reactions in terms of what happens to the energy. So what we'll do is we'll talk about molecules that we build or take apart, and sometimes when you build a molecule or take it apart, there is a change in the amount of energy that is used to go into that or that comes out of that. So typically reactions that release energy are called exergonic, and those that store up energy are called endergonic. This is a typical example here. Here we have glucose, which we learned about already. These are small monomers of monosaccharides, and they can be hooked together to make glycogen. Well, that requires energy to do that. So that's an energy in or endergonic reaction. Likewise, that can be broken down. The stored up glycogen, say in your body, can be broken down into glucose, and when you break it down, that releases some of the energy. So that's an example of an exergonic reaction. Okay, another very common one we'll see in here is ATP and ADP. So when you put energy in, and you take, say, a molecule of like ADP, and you put energy in, you can stick this third phosphate group onto that, and that forms ATP. So you don't need to memorize the details of these structures right now, but you do need to notice that ADP with a D, as in dog, is very, very similar to ATP with a T, as in Tim, but the difference is that third phosphate, and that makes all the difference. And you notice here, there's all these negative charges here. Well, this is also negatively charged, so to stick that on there's a resistance. So it's going to require energy to hook those up. Likewise, when we break those down, some of the energy is going to escape. ATP is very important because it's the main energy-rich molecule in a cell. So almost any time you see any kind of movement or energy, something that requires energy, you're going to see this ATP molecule.